A legend is sung of when England was young, and knights were brave and bold. The good king had died, and no one could decide who was rightful heir to the throne. It seemed that the land would be torn by war or saved by a miracle alone, and that miracle appeared in London town. The sword in the stone. Whoso pulleth out this sword from this stone and anvil is rightwise born King of England. An epic song for a sort of okay card. Legend of the Sword and the Stone is an amethyst action song for 2 that gives a character challenger +3 for the turn. It seems fine, particularly in draft or for a song-focused deck, but outside of that I don't see anyone wanting to run this over Megara or Panic. But that's just one of several reveals we've had this week. Let's start off with the vanillas, bearing in mind that some of these have not been officially translated to English yet. Yzma, Insomniac, a clone of the wardrobe, Belle's Confidant, Cheshire Cat, Always Smiling, an emerald version of Mini Zipping Around from last week, and Virana, Fang Chief, and Card Soldier's full deck, the emerald and ruby versions respectively of Winnie the Pooh, Honey Wizard. The most interesting thing about these is that Virana is a strictly better version of Jumba Jukaba, ignoring classifications. Presumably, at some point, we get a payoff for alien or inventor decks to justify this. Moving on to actually interesting cards, in Amber we have Christopher Robin, Adventurer, a 2/6 2-lore for 6 with, when he readies, if you have 2 or more other characters, gain 2 lore. That's kinda nuts, and makes me want to make an Amber Ruby deck that readies Christopher Robin extra times with LeFou and Fan the Flames. However, keep in mind that without an extra way to exert or ready him, you essentially have to wait 2 turns after playing him to get that effect. Maybe give him Rush with White Rabbit's Pocket Watch to get that going sooner. We also have another new song, World's Greatest Criminal Mind, costing 3, letting you banish a character with 5 or more strength. So it's definitely nice to see Amber getting hard removal, but there aren't a whole lot of characters that natively have 5 or more strength, so this may see limited use. However, you can use support and things like Vicious Betrayal to increase an opposing character's strength to make them a valid target, so that's something to keep in mind. Finally, the first Amber item of this set, Dragon Gem, for 3 ink, uninkable, and you can exert it and pay 3 to get back a character with support from your discard. So right now, support only exists in Amber and Sapphire, but there are some decent targets for this, most notably Maximus Palace Horse. With 8 ink, this gives you infinite bodyguards. I presume we'll also be seeing a Sisu or Raya with support at some point. In Amethyst, we got a second new song in Gruesome and Grim, costing 3 uninkable, letting you play a character costing up to 4 for free and giving it Rush, then banishing it at end of turn. So if this character dies during the challenge anyway, that last clause doesn't matter, and if it's one of the Merlins that does something when he leaves play, that can also be nice. But remember, you can also bounce the character with Arthur or Madame Mim, and then you don't need to banish anything. Just throw out your Merlin Goat, have it challenge something, then yeet it back into your hand before he dies. A very nifty card that I'm sure players will find a multitude of uses for. Moving to Emerald, we get Belle Bookworm, a 2/4 1-lore for 3 uninkable with, while an opponent has an empty hand, she gets +2 lore. So 2 parts to her. Firstly, she seems to be the intended shift target for Hidden Archer, but having the same cost as the shift cost makes this a little awkward. On the other hand, this is clearly a payoff to discard-focused decks, letting you churn out lore with a cheap character if you can keep your opponent's hand empty. She's kind of competing in that spot with Prince John, as they're both uninkable, and I think usually you'll probably play one or the other. By contrast, our next card is surely an auto-include in every Emerald deck, Donald Duck, Perfect Gentleman, a 2/5 2-lore Floodborn for 4 shift 3 with, at the start of your turn, each player may draw a card. This is the first start of turn ability we've seen, giving us something to do during the set step of Ready, Set, Draw. And getting that extra draw every turn is massive, particularly in a discard deck where you can just discard whatever your opponent draws anyway. I'm very glad that more colors are getting card advantage tools, and even if you're not playing a strictly discard focused deck, you're going to want to run this Donald if your second color isn't Amethyst. Next we have a couple actions. First is Pack Tactics, cost costing 4 ink that gives you 1 lore for each damaged opposing character. This is insane, particularly in an Emerald Steel deck. Playing this card can just win the game outright and is much better than Steal from the Rich. And it's inkable! There are going to be a lot of decks that run this card. Then there's Ring the Bell, a 3-cost action that banishes a damaged character. Delightful. So much better than Stampede, and again, it's inkable. This is going to be another very common card in Emerald decks, but especially in Emerald Steel with all its pings. Moving to Ruby, there's Fidget, Radigan's henchman, who is a color-shifted Peter Pan Neverlanding. I mean, it's still a good card, but we've now got enough evasives in Ruby and Emerald that you can start to pick and choose which stat lines you want. If you prefer the high strength on Peter Pan, well, now you can run 8 of him. However, I think I'll be more interested in Minnie Mouse Stylish Surfer, a 1/3/2 lore for 3 with evasive. The whole point of evasive is you want to avoid challenges, so having higher willpower is more relevant to avoid direct damage. And she quests for 2! She's going to be a must-include in every evasive deck going forward. Finally, there's Queen of Hearts Impulsive Ruler, a 2/2/1 lore for 2 with Rush. So an inkable Rush character is always nice, but with only 2 strength, she's going to be more used as a way to finish off a damaged character than a snipe, the way Rafiki is used. But being able to come out swinging on turn 2 could be quite nice. Moving to Sapphire, we have Hiram Flaversham, Toymaker, a 1/6/1 lore for 4 with when you play him or he quests, you may banish one of your items to draw 2 cards. So that seems more like toy breaking than toy making, but that still seems pretty sweet. In an item deck, you get a draw when you play the item from Maurice, then you can get rid of it and draw even more cards with Flaversham. Then get the item back with Tamatoa! This will definitely help make item decks more consistent. Staying with Great Mouse Detective, we get Mrs. Judson, Housekeeper, a 1/5/2 lore for 4, uninkable, with when you play a Floodborn, you may ink the top card of your deck. So the ability seems strong, except the whole point of ramp is you want to do it early, and she costs 4. I mean, you could ramp into her with 1 jump ahead, but it's still a little late. However, if you have a decent number of Floodborn in your deck, it might be worth it. I do hope this set has more ways of ramp, though. Then there's Falling Down the Rabbit Hole, a 4-cost uninkable action that has each player ink one of their characters. So firstly, this is symmetric removal for cheaper than Dragonfire or Let It Go that gets around Ward. If Cusco is your opponent's only character, then away he goes into the inkwell. And it's also real good in multiplayer. Ideally, you want to play this either with an empty board yourself or with a character that's already done their job, like Mickey Detective. But even if you have to lose someone important, removal is still removal, and I think this is absolutely going to see a lot of play. Next is Sisu, Divine Water Dragon, our first Sapphire Legendary. She's a 2/4/2 lore for 4, uninkable with when she quests, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you may put 1 into your hand, put the rest in the bottom. This is awesome! This is superb card draw, assuming she survives a turn. Unlike Rapunzel, you don't get the draw immediately, but it's not contingent on a character being damaged, and you get a bit of a filtering effect, and it happens every turn for as long as she survives. I can't wait to slot her into my Ruby Sapphire ramp deck. Our last card, surprisingly there hasn't been a single steel card yet this week, is Gumbo Pot, a 2-cost item that you can exert to heal 2 different characters for 1 each. This is perfect for a Grand Pabby deck and makes me want to make a combo Items Maurice and Healing Grand Pabby deck, and either that or the Merlin Madame Nim bounce deck is going to be the next one I do for Yzma's Secret Lab, so be on the lookout for that. That's it so far. We still have more than half the set to get through though, so I'm sure the next week will have tons of reveals.